Hello, everyone. Welcome to this final discussion of The Darkness That Comes Before, which is the first book of the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker. We have been reading this, I don't know, each a part each every 2 weeks or so. Now we're switching to a weekly cadence where we'll be reading about 100 pages each week. Today's discussion is for the final part of the book, and starting 2 weeks from now, we will be taking a break of 1 week, but the week after that, we'll start reading 100 pages every week of The Warrior Prophet, which is the second book in the trilogy. With me, I have the usual group of friends. Carl, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Yes, I am Carl D. Albert, author of Truth of Crowns and very happy member of the Page Chewing Forum.
And Steve.
Nice. I am also a member of the Page Chewing Forum. Happy to be here. And this is my third read of this book, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Hello, everyone. This is Mike Mansky. He's my last name, but it's okay. I guess I'm in work mode or something, but yeah, I'm exposed.
You're exposed.
But yeah, it's my first time reading the book, and happy to be discussing with you today.
Also my first time.
Me too. And my name is Varsha. If anybody's listening to this on Steve's podcast, is like, who is that girl who doesn't introduce herself?
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. Everybody knows Varsha, though. Varsha's awesome.
Cool. So that was interesting. Just for full disclosure, I didn't finish reading the final 50 pages, but everyone else did. So we will talk through all of it. What did everyone think? Did this book fulfill all your expectations so far since we've gotten to the end? And Steve, what was reading it for the third time like?
Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'm gonna do a brief tangent for the audience because I know they're really dying to know. Steve, you are in fact the founder of Page Chewing, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what you were like. I'm a member of Page Chewing. I'm like, you're our like Lord and Father. Like, what are you talking about?
I just don't know when to quit. That's all it is. I'm too dumb and stubborn to know when to quit. But yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess since I decided to interrupt the flow, I will continue just briefly to say that I did enjoy the book overall. It was in many ways what I expected, in other ways not. I remember being surprised by how fast-paced I found the first act. And the last act, I also found well-paced. I think I was surprised that there wasn't a big sort of climactic battle in some ways, although certainly by like the time we were even just getting to the first chapter of the final act, I was wondering how that would even happen, because it certainly didn't seem likely. And spoilers, Varsha, for the last 50 pages, there isn't a random big battle at the end. I guess you could say our climactic moment of tension is almost the horror scene. It's not almost, it is. It's a horror scene. And I thought that was really interesting. I was very compelled by it. I was a little bit disappointed, I guess, just because we have seen such a huge scope of stuff that we didn't, not that it had to be like a giant battle, but I guess I was just expecting more of a conflict when it really felt like it was a lot of just like kind of political maneuvering. And certainly kind of completing arcs you'd seen in this book. But I don't know. I guess I just wanted a little more at the end of this, particularly because of the scale of everything. But that said, I know we're certainly going to get what I'm looking for going forward. So, Mike, how about you?
So we're just doing kind of like general, what do we think of this? Yeah. So I feel very similar in that this section is called The Holy War, and I was expecting like a battle or something. So I guess the book is kind of like table setting for what comes next. And I learned that it took Bakker 15 years to write this. I think he says that in the next, in the introduction to the next book. And so that's just kind of fascinating to me. I mean, that there wasn't like a big battle or whatever. Definitely there's something happening in the background. The Holy War is happening. I noticed that we were introduced to some new characters. We were introduced to some more concepts, like Janan came up quite a bit. And yeah, but overall, I enjoyed it. I think it was 5 chapters, so it's kind of hard to remember which ones I liked or not, but generally was satisfied. I think I was expecting a little bit more. But that horror scene, the reveal towards the end, I would agree, was also was unsettling, but thrilling, I guess. That's about it.
So what was the third time like, Steve? So I've been curious, like I don't reread a lot, but when I do and make it to the end of the book, I feel really happy and satisfied because like I've visited a favorite friend, it feels like. So did you enjoy it more or less than the other times you read it?
That's a good question. I think the first time I read it was I think probably the second time was the most enjoyable. The first time, there's a lot I didn't catch. There's just so much going on. I think there's just so much. There's the story, and then there's all these other things that are happening behind the scenes that I think the first read was hard for me to keep up with everything that was going on. But this third read was more of trying to catch things that I missed. And I think this is one of my all-time favorite books. But I will say that I think what I do agree on is that it's not what you expect, because I think we're so used to having us like a battle or like a climax, something to kind of set up the next book, something to like something major to happen. But I think it's more subtle in this one, with the reveal of the face, the scene, and also we get some information on Kellis that wasn't it does, the pacing does feel a little weird. But I wonder if that's just because what we're used to, or if it is a little wonky. I wonder if if it feels odd because we're not used to it, or is it just off? If that makes sense.
Interesting. So I was going to say, I liked it for the fact that it does not have a battle. I mean, I like the fact that it doesn't have a battle, and I don't know that I necessarily expect it. I more, in the sense that I don't want it, I love reading fantasy books, but one thing that I do not look forward to is like big battles at the end of them. So it was a nice change for me to. I'm at the 526 page mark and 50 pages to go. It didn't seem like we were building up to any battle. So it made me happy that we were going to probably end the book on this, whatever conversation was taking place, because there was one more chapter of politicking, presumably, and then one more chapter in what is it? How do you guys say that place? Momem?
That is a very good question. do we pronounce the M or the N at the end? I assume we only pronounce one of them, but I don't know which one.
I want to say both just because.
Momem.
So anyway, yeah, I really liked that aspect of it, and that makes it feel more like a first book of a trilogy, if that makes sense, because a battle necessarily concludes some things. Since a trilogy that tells a single story is necessarily like, it is the first third of a story. I almost think of it like the first third of a big book, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
For me, it wasn't even. I mean, I guess I did expect a big battle, but I just expected more, I guess, of like an emotional climax. That the only character I felt like had one, and this is absolutely no pun intended, is Esmenet. That I definitely felt like Varsha. I don't think you've read her final. Yeah,
Yeah.
I found that very dramatic and climactic for her storyline.
Hmm.
Although it certainly leaves more room for her. And I guess in contrast, I just didn't necessarily feel like the other characters, particularly like Akamian, Akamian. I forget how did we say it? It's pronounced
I think the glossary has it Akamian, but I've been saying Akamian
okay.
because they call him Akka for short. So
Aka, yeah.
yeah.
So, well, regardless, I just definitely felt like he. Um, I don't know. I was kind of. I mean, I guess he is a historian. We know because of the epigraphs, but I was just really disappointed that there wasn't. I suppose he had a sort of climactic moment. Actually, I take that back. Um, but I don't know. I guess I was just wanting more. That said, I think Steve is onto something in that. Certainly, I think expectations are at the root of this, and that it was my understanding or my experience of kind of epic fantasy as a genre, and even this book, just based on my expectations of it, that I expected something that we didn't necessarily get, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing.
Hmm.
It reminds me of Fellowship of the Ring in some ways. Although, yeah, I mean, I guess just in terms of like I guess there is a battle at the end of Fellowship, but it's not necessarily the kind of huge, it's climactic. I don't know. Yeah, this book is weird, but it was fun. And again, I liked that there was that horror element, which we'd seen previously, but really saw very dramatically and distinctly shown off in the scene that you have not yet read, Varsha.
Thank you for skirting around it. I really appreciate it. But I mean, you don't necessarily have to. But yeah, if we're able to, if we need to reveal it for meaningful conversation, that's absolutely fine.
I
Anyway.
think the only meaningful thing we have to talk about in regards to it is just that Skaos is a monster,
Mm,
and I don't think we need to define exactly what, other than clearly he's wearing the skin of Skaos,
Yeah.
or
okay.
it.
Okay.
He's wearing the skin of Skaos, and the scene where that is properly revealed is like a full blown
Yeah.
horror scene.
I see.
And
Did
it's
they
very cool.
did they tell us whether he's been like that the whole time we've known him, or if it's a recent change? Like, did someone else recently become
Was
Chaos,
he
or like
replaced?
is it no longer the real Chaos since recently? Yeah, they don't tell us.
I think
I don't
there
think so.
was implied that he'd been like that for, or that is what
Okay.
I think the
Okay.
emperor says, if I remember. Uh, that's
Mm.
what I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
And if I'm not mistaken, we're introduced to Skaos being told that he's starting to maybe act a little different, and they're almost worried it's like age or something
Mm.
creeping up to him, that he's slowing down, which I guess took at face value because I'm a fool, but was maybe supposed to be kind of a hint that something's not quite right here.
Mm.
My
So
boy was not my boy.
yeah, I was gonna ask. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but when we were reading part two, was it? That's why he was introduced. When we were reading part two, Chaos was your favorite character. So how did you feel to have that flipped on you?
Oh, I felt like the rug was pulled out from under me. I don't even know why. Like, again, I don't know why I attached myself to him. We all have our quirks, and for some reason, I, I could guess, I could explore this, but fundamentally, I don't know. There's an X factor here. Maybe the X factor was that I could sense he was in fact not human, and I just wasn't smart enough to realize that's what I was sensing.
Hmm.
No, not at all. I had no idea what was going on. I just thought he was kind of like a relatively sweet isn't the right word, but I guess not a monster, and he was surrounded by monsters, and then it turns out he's literally a monster, and I loved it. I mean, at first I was like, oh God, really not my guy. But then I very quickly turned around and was like, that's really cool. Particularly when you get to the ultimate reveal, it was like, this rocks.
Mm. Did they? Did we? I forget. Did we get a Scales perspective in part 2? I don't think we did. Right? No, we just saw him from other people's. Okay, yeah. Mike, what did you think of the big reveal?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was freaky. You know, and I mean, one of the things I wrote down is about who they say he is, and then later on there's a question of, well, is he really consult? And I don't know if we can say that or not, but Varsha, you've said we can talk about it. I think you'll read it and you'll experience it, but initially they say he's Kisharam.
Mhm.
And so I wrote that down. Is that what we would have thought? And I don't know. However, if you think back, we know that didn't the emperor. I'm a little bit hazy, so you all with better, clear minds or clear memories can say, did we not learn early in the book that the emperor he's the one that connected with the Kisharam? They communicated, and they had the guy had this ghost face or whatever. I wanted to kind of go back to that. So there was quite a few of those kinds of linkages. There was another one as well that related to Kellis, but so that made me think that he probably orchestrated all of that, and then I think then kind of the populace lost faith in the emperor, I suppose. So that had some repercussions. So I found that to be very interesting. However, that very last section, and it's not there was not the very, very last part, I don't think is a big spoiler or anything, but it's kind of well, life just kind of goes on, and the powerful people, the important houses continue to whatever, make money. And I found that to be, I kind of like that. Found that really interesting take on the end of a book. But so it makes you think, well, this didn't maybe have that many repercussions. But Akamian goes kind of crazy, and he's like, well, so many of these people potentially, could be consult. So it's big. It's a really important part of the book. And I feel like I might have mentioned something like that, but I'm not trying to act like I remember that I predicted something, but
No,
I do remember thinking that. Anyway, I was being too long-winded here, but that was what I thought about that section.
Yeah, you did make a point earlier, Mike, about how if you bring shape shifting into the picture, then anybody could be anything.
My own skeptic nature, I think.
Yeah.
I definitely found it frustrating, but also very compelling that the people, including the emperor, just went to, oh, it's the Sisharim. It makes perfect sense because they don't, that's the enemy they know versus the enemy they don't understand and aren't even sure exists. But it was immensely frustrating because Akka is, in classic Mandate Schoolmen, he's very much playing his role. He's like, you all are idiots. The consult is here. He's Cassandra, right, from Greek myths, where he can see the horrors. He knows what's happening, and no one listens to him. No one believes him, except Kellis. Seemingly, Kellis seems to actually listen to him, which explains at least partially why he likes Kellis so much. That was something I think emotionally I struggled with a bit. It's so weird because Akamian is so obviously flawed and insecure, and it seems so obvious to me that he should be easily manipulated. but the speed at which he emotionally attached to Kellis, I found difficult to believe. And I guess I just have to buy that to some degree. And Akamian even thinks about it. He's like, I'm so skeptical as a person, and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know anything about this guy, but I just like feel like he's a good guy. Like, he's unlike anyone I've ever met. He's just really great. And I don't know if it bugged me. I guess I would have liked to see that. It felt inevitable that was going to happen, but I felt like it happened maybe a little too quickly, just for my taste. That was probably my biggest criticism, honestly, of this section, was that I understand conceptually how the Logos works and how charismatic Kellis is, but it just felt like everyone drank his Kool-Aid maybe a little too fast, like including people who I felt like should have put up maybe a bit more of a fight. That said, I'm certainly intrigued to see where his story goes, and I'm excited to see him, start a cult or something.
So I have 2 points in response. Today is the day I disagree with everything Carl says.
I love it. I love disagreement.
Ding, ding, ding.
But what I think, isn't it kind of the point of the way the Logos was described, that you can manipulate everything, and like Kellis has a history of people following him real quick, so it makes sense to me that it is so quick. That's sort of one of the features, feature not a bug thing. And the other thing is,
Oh my god, I'm having flashbacks.
Oh god, yeah.
oh, were you a product manager, Steve?
Software developers, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's who I make my case to, feature not a bug.
Yeah.
Anyway, the other thing, that nighttime conversation between Akamian and Kellis, where they talked about how that conversation was, where neither was manipulating the other and they were just exploring ideas, there was no judgment. I mean, that was interesting, because I loved that description so much, and like that's the kind of conversation I'd like to have, and that's the kind of friendship that would be wonderful if it developed. But then, like, on one side of that friendship is Kellis. But from Akamian's perspective, if he does believe that Kellis is genuine, it makes sense. Like it was an entire night of talking, like, or evening of conversation. That is enough time for someone to like really appreciate and like someone. Like I've liked people in a lot less, probably my problem, but like I just need people, like I just need some things that I feel strongly about. If people say things that make sense to me, I'm like, yeah, cool, I want to be friends with this person some more. So like it just made a lot of sense to me, their relationship and their friendship. So
No, that's fair. I think you make a lot of really good points, and certainly, again, Akamian is like very lonely and is desperate for someone who doesn't judge him. So his perception of that, I can imagine that being very influential on him. It does make sense. I guess it may just be a matter of like maybe it's my perspective from the outside, because I know Kellis isn't trustworthy, or that probably is a big part of it. Maybe it's just that I am also just like tired of seeing him just like walk all over people. And so emotionally, I'm wanting someone other than Nair to like realize something is up with this guy, or not even realize something is up, although I would love that, but to just like not immediately fall head over heels in love with him. But that said, I think you make a lot of really wonderful points, and certainly Kellis, as we have seen, is very good at what he does. So I think it's probably my problem more than anything, but that's how it goes.
Could I just make a quick comment? I really appreciated that Bakker had set up kind of our opinion as the reader of Kellis, and then we see him kind of interacting with people, new characters, and that's when everyone's kind of coming together. Midway through this part of the book, and in my mind, as the reader, you're like, well, you can't trust this guy, whoever he's interacting with. I was just like, he seems like genuine, but we know that there's so much more going on. There's other motives, and I think the biggest thing, though, for me is we still don't know his intentions, right? We're still not clear what his ultimate intentions are. So I haven't decided yet if I dislike him. I'm kind of I'm still neutral. I'm still just find him fascinating.
Yeah. Sorry, Steve, what are you saying?
No, go ahead. I'll go after you.
Oh, I was going to say, I feel like in this part of the book, I've been largely neutral about Keller so far, but I feel like I started liking him. Like I've really enjoyed the character so far, but I feel like I've started liking him, the person.
You're falling for bullshit.
Yeah, I think I am. But the reason is, two things. One, mostly the epigraph from Kamian. One, when he realizes that like everything is centered around him. I'm not saying he's likable. I feel like I don't even know how to explain it. It's a bunch of like pretty unlikable characters that we're reading about, and he seems as the most neutral person here. As like he's the most likable, not apart from Esminet and Akamian, of course, but there was an epigraph I read which makes me think that the friendship did not end poorly for Akamian. I can't, if only I can pull it up from the right chapter. I've only read 3, but I can't find the epigraph. So I think it may have been 465, which was a chapter in which they meet. Let's see. Yeah, it was 465, I think. So this one where... Oh, yeah. Those of us who survived will always be bewildered when we recall his arrival, and not just because he was so different then. In a strange sense, he never changed. We changed. So, this doesn't feel like it's being written by someone who dislikes Kellis or what he stood for, if that makes sense.
That is so interesting because I read that the completely opposite way. That was so foreboding to me. That I read that and I was like, oh yeah, like this he is about to like take over everything. I mean, I that's so interesting. I read that with a completely different tone.
Or it's possible that I latched onto him because Akamian latched onto him. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I feel like I like Kellis. It's not that I like him a lot. It's just I like him. I went from neutral to, I maybe like this character.
There's a lot to like about him, I think, in terms, particularly in the context of this book as a whole. I mean, one, he is extremely competent, and that is something that is easy to like. And on top of that, he actually takes the threat of the consult seriously, which is maybe his most likable trait, given that no one takes it seriously. And
yes,
as you will
too.
see, by the end of this book, even when confronted with like really plain, like a flashing red sign saying the consult is here, people still find excuses, which felt very human and again made perfect sense, but is extremely frustrating.
Yeah. And I want to start a new topic, but Steve, you were going to say something on this subject first.
Yeah, I just want to mention about Akamian and his willingness to accept Kellis so fast. I think part of it is that he's looking for validation from Kellis because he's been banging the drum about the consult and the dangers of the consult and the dreams from Saswatha. And now Kellis is a walking personification of all these things he'd been warning them about. So
Right.
now it's almost like I'm validated. He's here.
Yeah.
The Dunyan are back, and the prophecy is it's happening. Like
No, that's
so,
definitely true, right? And that he has Siswatha's memories. I mean, that is something that I think I don't even know if Akamian has thought about this, but like while you may maintain your individuality, if you have someone else's memories inside you, that's still going to change your emotional reality and how you perceive the world. And so certainly if he has this prophecy that Siswatha experienced, then seeing that realized would be a powerful thing. That's something I think I definitely undercounted in the moment. Again, I think when it comes down to it, I'm just mad because I don't trust Kellis and I don't like Kellis. I mean, I find him very compelling. I like when Kellis is on the page because things are happening and he makes things happen specifically. But I just do not trust. I just know he's going to do some horrible stuff like he's definitely an ends justify the means type of guy, and I I I just do not trust him to have real like. I think if he's ever confronted with real empathy, like truly strongly with real empathy, and has to like really directly face it, I think he's going to crush that like a bug. I think he will happily turn himself into a monster to do whatever he thinks needs to be done.
Steve is just evil villain rubbing his hands together.
Excellent.
Can't wait for this. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? I know you wanted to move on. So, like, I actually marked this down.
Yeah.
We get a dream, or it comes back. There's another dream that is shared with us, and it's there. Is it the king speaking to Seswatha saying, "And Anasarimbur will return at the end of the world," and that keeps being repeated. So that's why Akamian is latching onto this guy. I think it's valid. Like whoever said it's validating.
Yeah.
But that I just wanted to mention that the dream, and I wanted to check if that also had come up in like chapter 3 or whatever. But I didn't get a chance to go back. I don't know, Steve, if that was also mentioned, or they just gave us a little bit more information this time in the dream. But that was really interesting to me.
I think this one, I didn't go back and check, but I did remember the thing about the seed from chapter 3. But what I wanted to look at, which I didn't get a chance to do, is see if there were any subtle differences between the two dreams. I think if I remember correctly, in the first one, it was all Seshwata, and then Akamian wakes up and realizes it's himself, like the person talking to the king. But in this one, he's referred to as Akamian. But I could be wrong. I seem to remember that Akamian became Seshwata and then back. But in this one, it was Akamian all along. Is that true? I don't remember where in the book the first dream happened.
Is Seswatha, I think. That's the first time I read that, I was totally confused. But yeah.
That's my understanding too, that he dreams, and I think in some ways he's aware that he is not literally, like I feel like it's almost like a vivid, very vivid dream where he's kind of aware it's a dream, but he also is experiencing it as Seswatha. It's almost like this emotional paradox. Varsha, is the next topic you're going to say, is it related to what we're talking about at all? Because I have one thing I want to propose / ask everyone that is directly related to this.
Oh, yeah. It is directly related to the topic of Kellis, but we can do your question first.
Also Kellis related. I was just going to ask, and Steve's going to have to poker face again. Do we think Kellis's bullshit works on the consult? Like, do we think he could theoretically manipulate monsters like he manipulates humans, or is this strictly a human thing?
Interesting. He couldn't figure chaos out in his human form, but if they met as monsters, yeah, interesting. Steve's taking a drink. Is that your poker face?
I think he's fallible. I don't think I still think he's got limitations. It's hard to say, but did he? There's probably a few things that he might have missed already. Anyway, but that's a really good question.
Hmm. I want to say no. That's going to be my prediction that he can't tell because when we're in his perspective, we get things like blood rush to his face, and he can see increase in heartbeat. Like he observes these things, which I'm not saying that he wouldn't be able to ever, but it feels like something you have to train to figure out, not like some magical ability you have to figure people out. It's just, uh, it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody watched that show, Lie to Me, but it's, anyway, like he's reading micro expressions, sort of. That's what it seems like, which maybe he could eventually, if he hung out with enough consult and read all their emotional responses, perhaps.
That's an interesting idea. Is like if he learns more about them, he can maybe learn more like how to manipulate them. I will say a point against this, although I do think it's a really cool idea, and I certainly don't think he would start being able to do it left and right, like he does with humans. But a point against this is that, I mean, in the prologue, he doesn't even try to do it with the no man or non-man. Yes.
And,
and that it just doesn't seem like that is on his radar as a thing he can do.
And I think he does. He could not read Skaos. It was coming back to me. I'm pretty sure that. So I'm going to say no. Yeah.
Okay. He does deal in probabilities and stats to a certain extent, like for lack of a better word, like obviously we can use the words that he did, but I don't remember. But he does deal in probabilities, and you could, in theory, build probabilities out of what the consult do, possibly, if they are in any way predictable. But yeah, that's
what I will say about Skaos too is I would argue he did read Skaos, because that's how he identified Skaos as inhuman, was seeing his micro expressions, and the fact that he wasn't blinking, and his heart, his face didn't flush, and things like that. Now, does that mean that he is then, because he can't see the visage of whatever it is he's dealing with, theoretically, that he can't then manipulate it? I would assume probably yes. I mean, I guess that's the question too, is if he's blind, can he no longer do what he does? Does it require eyesight? I don't know. I don't know what the limits are exactly. I guess we'll see. It's certainly random theory. At some point, Kellis is going to be blinded. I have nothing to predict that, but that potentially would hamper him and feels very biblical. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Skilvendi dude was blinded, right? He had his eyes gouged out, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of their go-tos, I guess, in this world. That was sad, actually.
Yeah, that did. I think there is basis for what you said, Carl, because if he can't predict what the console do, if at least it seems like he doesn't know enough to figure them out, then he's trying to figure out all the events, right? Is that what the labyrinth is? I don't think I got to that part yet, but if there are things that he can't figure out, elements of the world that he can't figure out, then there will essentially be bits that he won't be able to see how they will play out, right? So,
right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The question that I wanted to ask was on the subject of trust. We've said, I think, last week and this week that we don't trust Kellis, but I kind of want to say, do you? The question I want to ask is, do you trust him less or more than, say, someone like the Emperor Sirius or Proyas, also to a certain extent? Although Proyas has become slightly more likable in this one, we'll talk about that when we get to him. But pick a character that you really dislike in this book, and would you trust Kellis less or more than them? Because I feel like, for me at least, Kellis, yeah, I don't even know what trust means in his context, because he has no emotional response. I wouldn't like trust him with my hopes and dreams and whatnot. Like, he'll probably use them to his benefit, but then so will, Sirius and whoever other evil people there are. So
I can go. I think it's a good question. I've said this before. It's just, and I think somebody else mentioned it today, but I think it's just very difficult to trust anybody in this book. Kellis, for me, I feel he may have. I doubt it, but he may have good intentions, or what he sees are good, because he's this intellectual. Everyone else is kind of led by their faith or their culture or whatever, which comes up a lot. In knowledge versus faith comes up many times in one of the chapters. So that tells me that um, he's an intellectual, I guess. Those words aren't used in here, but so I in some ways he may have a good, he may be trying to do things, but that are potentially going to help to lighten the apocalypse, but if he's the one that's bringing the apocalypse, that's problematic. Yeah, so it's really other characters. I think we've said we like Esminette. I think she's, yeah, definitely a little bit more trustworthy in a lot of ways. Yet she does kind of go behind. I'm blanking on the guy's name now. Sarcellus.
Sarcellus?
Yeah. The one.
The guy. Listeners, I'm doing finger quotes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my answer fundamentally is what you said, Mike, about I don't know that I trust anybody. I mean, even Esminette, like, it's all a matter of relative trust, and also the type of trust. Like, trust them for what? Trust them to do what? Depending on the scenario, depending on what it is we're talking about, I would, I trust Kellis to be more competent and to be more effective against the consult or against freaking anyone than I do trust Sirius. Yeah. But I trust Sirius more in that I think he's more predictable. I don't understand Kellis yet. I don't know what he intends fully. Beyond, clearly, he's looking for his dad. So in that way, he's less trustworthy. I think... I mean, in that way, in that Kellis remains an enigma, he's the least trustworthy, just because he's the one you're least able to predict. But, again, I feel like in some ways he's more, I don't even want to say moral, because I don't feel like that's the right word. But he's certainly not, he's not as cruel, I guess. He doesn't seem like a cruel person to me. I mean, that's like if his, if people are kind of made up of these like dichotomies or paradoxes or what have you, it is how callous he is that makes him so untrustworthy, his inability to feel empathy. But, I think we often associate that with like, then finding pleasure in cruelty. But Kellis doesn't find pleasure in cruelty. He's not afraid to be cruel if he feels like he has to be, but he doesn't actively seek out cruelty. He's not a serial killer. He's not Ted Bundy. He's not even like Sirius, right? So again, I think it really matters about how we're defining, not how we define trust, but what type of trust we're talking about. And again, my overall point would be that I really don't trust any of them in different ways. None of them are like someone I would truly point at as like a moral paragon who I would trust. Like none of them are like Lord of the Rings characters who I'm like, this guy would have my back. Like I'm there. Like even a Camion, I feel like could be a coward or something, you know, like even if he cares for you, I could see him just like not intentionally throwing you under the bus, but just like losing, you know, being weak. Same with Esmenet, you know, Esmenet has clearly shown a degree of, I don't know what you want to call it, moral cowardice. I mean, anything like they're just so broken that they don't know how to function healthily. And I think it requires someone to be to some degree healthy. You know, you don't have to be completely put together, but to some degree healthy to be trustworthy or to otherwise be unhealthily loyal, which is its own thing. So if someone is so extremely loyal, I guess then I would trust them. You know, if you're Samwise Gamgee.
Who's Samwise Gamgee in this book?
Yeah, who's our Sam?
Yeah.
Enrao, sweet Enrao.
Mm.
That's how Bakker wanted to make this point. He was like, I introduced to you the sweetest boy, and he dies within chapters of being introduced.
Yeah. And then another sweet old man, because is actually
that was okay. Skaos was different. Skaos was never sweet. He just was less terrible seeming than everyone else. Enrao was actively kind. You know, he's like he is like the epitome of like the like nice religious person who like takes his like personal beliefs and like he probably proselytizes some. You know, he's a priest, but like he was good-hearted. He was compassionate. He wanted to help people. He genuinely believed in people and the goodness of people. At least is our understanding of him. I think he's the one character in this entire book I would point to as being sort of a moral paragon. You know, not perfect, but someone I feel comfortable calling good.
Yeah. What do you think, Steve? Would you trust Sirius more or Kellis?
Let me answer carefully.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a minefield.
Yeah,
At this point in the book.
At this point in the book, between the two of them, I think, like Carl, you mentioned that it's almost like the devil you know, because you know what Sirius is capable of. You kind of know his motivations. With Kellis, I think you'd probably like take your chances because you know that Sirius will. He's looking out for himself. With Kellis, at least you have a chance of, you know, having some luck. So at this point, I would say Kellis is probably more trustworthy. But in this world, it's almost like they're all.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all just trying to survive, right? So it's hard to trust anyone.
No, I absolutely agree. I think I only brought it up because we've said strongly that we don't trust Kellis versus some of the others. I was curious. I mean, of course, we know what about him, but really, does lack of emotion or empathy, is that enough to make him less trustworthy? Or rather, I didn't, the concept, the notion of trust didn't even come up for me. So I was curious about that aspect of our thoughts on Kellis. One last thing, at least for me, that I want to bring up for Kellis before we try to move on to other folks. When Kellis, yeah, he seems to be talking to his father a lot in his thoughts. But does anyone have thoughts on what that was about? And also, oh no, I lied. There are several things about him that we have yet to discuss. The backstory we got about his introduction to the logos. That was cool with his old teacher. But anyway, yeah, let's do the father thing first, and then we can go back to that backstory.
Again, it felt very. It reminded me of Jesus a lot, sort of like in the son praying to the Father almost. That's what came to mind for me. But again, that may just be. I mean, these are clearly influenced by Abrahamic faiths in a big way. So, yeah.
Okay.
Oh
Sorry, I
no,
thought Mark was
sorry.
going to say something.
I was looking at some of my notes. I don't think I have anything on this topic really. I know that later on, I noticed that there was some conjecture. But it was like in chapter 19 from. But this was actually about whether Kellis was a spy. This is what Akamian was thinking. But I no, I don't. Yeah, I don't have too
Mm,
much else to say on this topic. There's a lot other things I have on Kellis though, especially
mm,
the insight into the Dunye and his training,
mm,
which to me was very much like Zen Buddhism, from what I've learned. Um,
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I love the little snippets in between in the chapter I'm on, which is what, 15, 16. Um, no, that's not the chapter I'm on. But yeah, I did love the description of how Callus became uh like start what's the sorry uh how he was introduced to the logos. I thought that was brilliant, and yeah, it did seem very similar to some real world faiths slash techniques, I think, minus the privations. I guess, like, he didn't eat or sleep during that whole
yeah,
time,
he
right?
shat himself, I
So
think.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that.
Oh,
You
I'm
maybe haven't even
okay.
gotten to that
Oh,
point yet.
okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Spoiler
No,
alert.
that's a big one.
Spoiler alert.
I wish you hadn't.
It actually, I mean, it hadn't even occurred to me how much it's like the story of
To
the
me, yeah.
Buddha, you know, where in that he didn't consume anything. Like, he literally just sort of meditated for like days, which I'm no expert, but
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure that's like the story of he like went into the woods. I mean, admittedly, I don't think, Kels wasn't in the woods and didn't, but that's my understanding. And then I do think it's interesting that he isn't, a lot of times when I think of meditation, I think of sort of mindfulness and being aware of one's body as kind of a key component of it. But the sort of meditation that he's practicing is an out of body experience. Like, it's intentionally disconnecting him
From
from
the
his
self.
body, and I thought that was really interesting, where it's like, it, it's cutting yourself off from the darkness that comes before, I guess, and yeah, from the soul and from the self. And it is so not what I guess normally associate, but it makes sense given the sort of practice they have. And I, I think, like, a lot of his sort of stuff, I thought it was really interesting, but that one phrase being kind of the key. I mean, maybe simplicity is the key for a lot of, complex ideas, but I guess I found the one phrase being the key to be sort of, I don't know, that felt a little off to me. That, like, it was just repeat that to yourself endlessly until you're disconnected from your body and emotions and self. And um, I guess I was wanting a little more there. But that said, I really liked the way it was written. I thought it was wonderfully written, and there's just like the prose itself and a very intriguing idea. Um, and I confess to having, as I lay in bed last night, started repeating to myself, Logos has neither beginnings nor endings.
I think it's
Needless to say, I did not master it.
Okay, but you did fall asleep.
I did eventually. Luckily, I didn't shit myself, so that's a win.
Good on you.
there's somewhere in
Yeah.
here where it says he has become legion, and so I equated that with awakened. So it sounded like he was doing like this this chanting or what have you, but it was verbal and then mental, and then eventually continues until it means nothing, and then you get to that point of nothingness, which awakened something. That was my take on it. That was my equating it to some studies that I've done in the past, but yeah, I that was chapter 17. I really enjoyed that. We also learned about the quandary of man, and then there was something that was very interesting that is not delved into very much, but we learned that the Dunyain are bred for intellect. So it was like selective breeding or something. And I was like, oh, wow. Because they've been 2,000 years in this enclave or what have you, sequestered. So that means that there's some kind of selective breeding, behavioral breeding happening there, which kind of blew my mind a little bit. Yeah.
It is really interesting.
Yeah.
Ellis should be getting so sick. He's got to be so inbred.
Probably.
That dude's in trouble. I'm calling it now. He's going to catch the flu and die next book. That's my prediction. Game over.
So Carl, your prediction is that Kellis will die next book?
He's going to catch the flu and die. That's what I'm telling you. He's just gotten lucky so far.
Specifically of the flu.
Yes, specifically that whatever that year's strain of influenza is, he's going to catch it and he's going to die.
That also makes sense because he hasn't been out of the Dunyain compound.
That's what I'm saying. He's inbred. He hasn't been exposed to a bunch of diseases. This dude's screwed.
No, I kept thinking, I said, I think at the last time we met that I was like, well, he hasn't really seen the rest of the world. How is he just able to kind of just, easily interact with everybody? But, no, I know.
It's fantasy. Yeah.
We shouldn't discuss that.
No, I mean, I'm there with you.
You're right.
I'm being completely facetious for anyone who can't see me with the shit-eating grin on my face as I'm talking about this. Obviously, I don't think Kellis is going to die from the flu, although that would be amazing. I'm not going to lie. There would be like, I don't even know how I would react to that. I do think I would be very impressed that Bakker went there, but no, that's not going to happen. He's got super eugenics powers.
It's a really bad cold. Spoiler alert. It's really
slips on a banana.
sinus infection gets him.
Yeah, exactly. Just one bad fall.
Yeah. He sneezes really hard and it's over.
I'm trying to think whether I would like a book like that less or more than, what was it? A Farewell to Arms. I liked the book. I hated the ending. Yeah, but anyway, that's sort of the benchmark for books endings that make people angry.
Do you guys think it's intentional? It's probably got to be intentional. That it's just occurring to me now that he's like blonde hair, blue eyed. Like he's literally the product of a eugenics program, and he's blonde haired and blue eyed. I mean, not that the Dunyain are like not seen around, but like that has to be intentional, right?
That did make me wonder too. Yeah,
maybe it's a good point. Could I ask about somebody else we haven't talked about? Just to kind of an open question, we haven't talked about Nayur that much.
Please.
And he kind of rises to some type of ascendancy here. And I meant to go back and reread it. I didn't quite understand. That was one part where I didn't really understand. How was it that he is now kind of the lead general or what have you? I know that he is. I think Kellis was involved in helping have some decisions being made when they interacted with Proyas, but it seemed kind of sudden to me because they're not well liked, those people. And maybe you all recall this better than I. So that was just something wasn't really like, it seemed sudden. I wondered if you felt similarly or what you felt about that.
It didn't hit me as I was reading it, but because I think Baker tried really hard to address that, and that obviously the other choice sucked in Confis, and like bending to the whim of Xerius and the Empire, the Nansir Empire. But they just like, do they have evidence that he is who he said he is? Because now that you mention it, like that's a big thing. That is like they just believe him when he says he fought the Kyanine armies and won at whatever that battle was. That like because that's the entire purpose behind him taking over, is that he's supposed to be this great general who beat the enemy they're going to fight, which makes sense conceptually, but I don't know that they have any reason to believe he actually did that. We as the readers know he did that, but that is like a huge assumption to make about someone, particularly someone who comes from an ethnic group that none of them like or trust.
I was actually thinking that he was, if I was assuming that earlier in the book he was the one that was beaten by Confis, right? So I was like, why would they think he would be? I know that he's got all the scars or whatever. He's intimidating. He's a big guy, I think he's intelligent. So he kind of breaks the mold, or he's I should say, he kind of breaks expectations, I suppose. But I'm not saying I didn't like it, but I thought it just seemed kind of sudden. So why did Royas like him?
I thought it. Yeah, I thought it was really cool conceptually, but I do think that there are some potential logic-y issues there. I mean, I guess you can buy because they're being emotional. They're trying to be rational, but it's all they're making emotion-based decisions. That said, it definitely seems like a stretch. And you're right. I mean, they address the fact that Confis beat him. That's like Confis' first argument is, I mean, I guess he wasn't in charge, but he has some great line about it, Nair, about like, right. That was like a lesson or something, which was incredibly badass. And I'll give Nair this. I have never liked him more than I did in that scene. He just came across as really cool. But, I don't know. You make good points, Mike.
I think that was chapter 16. There was also a lot of new characters and stuff. Like, anyway, it's like, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say that I felt like maybe Maithanet was the one who wanted Confis. The other kings were like, yeah, cool if we get him, but it's no big deal if we don't. So they just wanted a replacement for Confis so they could just move on with the Holy War instead of being stranded there and being held to Sirius's whims. So as soon as they got like a replacement figure for Confis, everybody's like, yeah, cool. Let's go now. We have a replacement, and you can no longer hold your provisioning hostage over like, I did not frame that sentence correctly, but like basically Sirius has no power over them anymore. He has to do what Maithanet says. That's I was convinced by by the reasonings. I was trying to figure out why. I think it's probably because I got the impression that the other kings, Maithanet was the only one who really cared about having Confis lead, especially in light of the defeat of the vulgar Holy War.
Yeah,
possibly.
I agree with you, Varsha, in that was kind of my takeaway almost. And I mean, Maithanet seemed to be the final, decision maker in a way that he agreed to Nair. He was like, yeah, let's tear ourselves free from the yoke of the Nansir Empire. But I still just, but I really thinking about it. I mean, credit to the book because I wasn't really thinking about it in the moment. I was caught up in the scene. But I just, again, I don't know why they believe this guy. Like, I guess he's got all the scars, but like, no one else knows
he's
him.
pals with
Yep.
Kellis.
Like, they don't personally know him. Yeah, I mean, I guess Kellis did his mind games, and that swayed him. I mean, literally, that was what swayed them in the end, was Kellis stepping up. So,
He gives us
I guess history turns on a dime, and sometimes people make seemingly bad decisions, which in this case I feel like is probably a really good decision for them. Actually, I mean, that's part of the reason I guess I was on board with it, because I was like, yeah, fuck the Empire, like. Let's go, Nair. Like, I know you can do this. Like, you may be a horrible person, but you're at least like intelligent and you do have the experience. I mean, again, like from a reader's perspective, I'm like, yeah, I'm there. I'm like, let's go. I do feel like if I was actually one of the characters in the moment, I'd be like, who is this guy? Like,
Right.
Didn't he just appear 2 weeks ago? And now we're making him the general of our armies? What's going on here?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Like I didn't get to the part that you mentioned where they all get convinced, but I was at the part where it started to happen, and it was after like one speech. Everybody's like, yeah, cool. Like, no need for confess. Let's go with this guy. So yeah, that part did feel too soon. But Proyas and Akamian tells him, you're moving too fast, you're not asking difficult questions of this person, you're willing to believe everything he says. So yeah, I don't know, maybe
What I'll say too about, like, this is inspired by the First Crusade. In the First Crusade, the generals, like the princes and lords who led the army, famously did not get along, and because they all had massive egos, and so they all wanted to be in charge, and so I'm surprised that you didn't have these other princes going around trying to be like, no, I'm going to lead the way. But I'm surprised Proyas didn't push it really hard. Like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to be the general.
Yeah.
Like, I'll lead this holy war. I actually care. Like, these guys just kind of went, okay, like, yeah, we'll take the barbarian. He'll do the job. But in a way, it's sort of like we've said, it's table dressing. Like, clearly, we're getting to the point where the story's really getting going, and so I guess this was a necessary piece to move.
It's on page 522. I highlighted this. This is Nair speaking. He says, "At Kayuth, I learned that war is intellect," which is what somebody else would, because there was a lot of mention of this intellect or knowledge versus the old ways or faith or culture or what have you. But that actually came out of, what's that?
Isn't that what Confus said? Wasn't Confus the one who first said that? And that was the moment where he was like turning that on him. I read this, and maybe I completely made this up, but my reading of that was it was a line that he overheard Confus say when he was laying and pretending to be dead. And that made Confus then realize too, because Confus immediately after that looks at him and is like, oh my God.
That's where that came from. Huh?
You were there.
Yeah, and then he says the shock. I missed this stuff, obviously, but the shock was playing on the nephew's face. Yep. It's an excellent point.
Such a good moment. Love that. Love it. Again, Nair had never been more likable for me. I mean, it helps when everyone's dunking on the Nansurium. They just suck so much. They suck. So I almost, if it was between like them and the consult, I maybe would root for the consult. Like, they're just so bad. I'm obviously exaggerating because one of them wants the apocalypse and the other one like at least is a civilization that like isn't just killing everyone. But oh man, they're just the worst. Especially now that my boy Skaos isn't there. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, they are not. They took a beating in this one. They're not. But at the end, we learn that life continues. The powerful people have their fancy coats and they're drinking tea or whatever. That's not what's in there, but that was my take on it. So I feel like they're going to have a comeback in part 2. The Nansur, the emperor and his cronies.
I think you're right.
We didn't hear from the
Conference isn't done yet, for
grandmother. I was kind of bummed.
No, yeah. I agree. I was also bummed. I like her. I mean, I don't like her, but I like when she's on screen. She's like a force of nature.
Yeah, she's. I
I
like
really
the
like-
characterization of her.
Yeah, I really like when it's her and Sirius, because they're so mean to each other. It's so funny. They're so funny. And the fact that there's the weird sexual dynamic too just makes it all the like juicier. It's wonderful.
There's a lot of phallus and whatnot in this book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, you mentioned a lot of characters. Did you have trouble? Did any of you have trouble keeping up with all the characters towards the last 100 pages or so?
Not the ones we've known well, but
Yeah.
all the like lords. I couldn't name a single one of them. I couldn't tell you anything about their cultures. It all went over my head when Kellis was like I was trying. I was like, there's not enough here. Like I just couldn't latch on to them.
Yeah, I didn't even try. I was like, if they come back, I'll deal with it then.
Exactly. That was my thought too. It's like, oh, I've read Malazan. Like, if this is important, we'll get back to it. Like, they'll have their moment.
Yeah, and then like we'll see it on a reread and say, oh, how did I miss that?
I will say the one thing I held on to was the little shriveled heads that stuck. In
Oh my god!
That imagery, that was crazy. I enjoyed that.
No problem. I'm still. I guess I get caught up in those things. I shouldn't pay too much attention. There's a character who's like a very tall guy, Prince. He's a prince of Galioth. We don't know too much about those people, so that I had noted. And there's somebody like, I don't know if that's that. I'm not sure if I caught the name, but is Shefer Amuni is someone who wears a mask because of their beliefs of Janan that they cannot show their bodies. Ianon.
That's the Hyanon guy. I do remember that. Now that you're mentioning it, I guess more stuck with me than I realized. Yeah.
I don't know. Steve, you brought it up. I assume we not just introduced them for no reason. I think they're probably going to maybe come up again.
Yeah, I just really quickly, I will say that Varsha and Carl's comment about if they're important, we'll hear about them again. Kind of like, I would say, don't get too caught up in the names and the different factions and stuff. Like, don't worry too much about keeping up with all the different names because the important ones will come back up again. So don't get too caught up with that. Because I got caught up with that the first time and then I thought, why did I bother so much? It don't matter.
I'm falling into that trap.
I would have been the same way. Yeah, I would have been the same way if I hadn't read Malazan. Malazan like completely trained me. Like I am not the same reader I was before I read Malazan. It fundamentally changed the way I read things.
How many POVs are there in Malazan?
Nice.
Isn't it like 1,000? Yeah.
Uncountable.
I have not read that yet. I was planning next year. Probably the only one. Are you putting a thumbs up? Are you planning to reread it?
We're reading
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for the fourth time.
Yeah, I will happily.
We'll try again.
When I finally finished The Cripple God, which, by the way, damper on my plans because I forgot my book in Chicago.
Oh.
and then I had to have my uncle ship it to me. It's arriving tomorrow, so I still have time to finish it before the wrap up. But I don't know if I will. But
No rush.
Oh my gosh, you haven't finished it yet. Oh wow.
No, I have.
I'm
Like
worried that
300
I'm not going
pages
to
left.
like it, but
But I'm making,
Oh wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see,
You may not. It's certainly divisive. It is. In some ways, it's also an acquired taste. Like I actually liked the first book. I know I struggled more with the second book than the first. I don't want to divert too much time to Malazan, but it is certainly a unique
really
series.
want to.
So
I didn't know. Okay, we'll discuss offline or whatever.
Yeah, we'll talk
Yeah,
about it after we finish recording. But yeah,
yeah. Not to veer off, but I will say that it's definitely a series you want to read with people, much like this one. And Varsha will be our guide, so we will be on Varsha's back all the time.
and by
Well, I'm just
guide,
reminding
I'll
Varsha.
be someone. What Steve means is that I'll be the one who can freely Google things without spoilers,
Yes, basically. Yeah.
and then decide what to tell you when.
Have you read any of the other books outside of the main
That's homework.
10?
No,
Or the
I
10?
will after I finish the Cripple Group.
Okay, I have that advantage over you, so I can help shepherd
Excellent.
the way. Yeah, I've read 2 of Esselmon's, and then the whatever the latest one, God is Not Willing.
And I think we're going to read all of them. So Esselmon and Erickson in some order.
Lovely.
So that's going to be fun. Yeah, I'm really excited for it.
No,
Mike is already regretting.
I love it. I just, I'm not going to say names, but there's some people that read so fast that we know, and I just like, how? I think my mind isn't
I don't
trained
know.
that way.
Yeah.
I need to work on it. Probably. I need to. No. Okay.
Not. No one is
Yeah.
like. I'll say names. Paramita. No one is like her. She has a superpower. It's the most insane thing, and then she retains it all. It's insane. My sister's like that. They're the only 2 people I've ever met who can read that fast and retain it all. It's crazy.
I have thoughts on that, but that's a whole nother
Absolutely.
episode. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no.
don't let it get you down, Mike. I'm the same way. Like 100 pages is a week for this series is like enough. So yeah,
I average
don't
like
worry about that.
25 pages an hour for
that's me.
most books
Yeah.
that I read. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just need to work less.
Anyway,
Don't we all?
do the fun things. I forgot what we were talking about here. We were talking about the number of people who we were introduced to at the end of the book. Sorry, I thought someone messaged me from work. But there was something here that I don't know, Steve. I'm sure this is not a spoiler, probably, so maybe you can answer. But so far we've had it's a pretty small group of people whom we've met and see as our main characters to follow. Does it stay that way, or does it like really fan out to a huge blowout, lots of people, or is it a spoiler to even say that? But
I will say that the number of POVs don't change a whole lot. Like the amount, so
okay.
it stays pretty consistent. Like from what I remember, there are, of course, there's like more characters that are introduced, like major characters, but the number of POVs don't get to be like overwhelming. I guess I could say.
Okay.
For this trilogy, have we met all the main characters or the major characters, or like just the trilogy, not the next 4, but just this trilogy?
Geez, I don't think it's much of a spoiler to say. I'm trying to think. I'm pretty sure this is it.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as like main POVs.
Okay.
So, new subject. In the prologue, we saw that the Ana Surimbor and the Dunyan were different groups of people, right? The Dunyan just happened to come to the place where the emperor or king had decided to take refuge. So that was a really long way of getting to the point. The question I was going to say was, did Akamian know of the fact that Kellis is Dunyan? Is he familiar with what Dunyan are? Is that something that the world knows in general? Like, did any of that come up?
It's a great question. I don't think so.
Yeah, he recognized him as on a Surin board, but not. I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
The only one who
I
thinks of
don't
him
think
as Dunian.
Seswatha.
Yeah.
Or I was just going to say, I don't think Seswatha dreams of the Dunyang, so then he wouldn't have any reason to recognize him, I guess.
Yeah, unless they're like a documented people in history, like the consult are that. Because and also the Dunian keep themselves secret, so that's one of the reasons why Callus wants to kill Moengus, right? Because he's making Dunian, making people aware of Dunian. So he's going to have to kill Nayur eventually, apparently, to make sure that word doesn't get out. But how's he going to keep him quiet now? Well, I guess he'll just kill everyone that Nayur ever tells. But anyway, on the subject of history in this world, I thought that there was so much skepticism about the consult because no one has heard about them or seen them for 2000 years. But in this section, we found out that as recently as 300 years ago, the mandate schoolmen were still fighting the consult.
Yeah.
Is it implied that they didn't have the shape-shifting abilities then? Like how did they fight the consult? Because if they could embed themselves anywhere, they maybe never left. Right?
That's a great point. I don't think they say explicitly. I was shocked, I will admit, that the consult had been active that recently, or that knowingly active. I don't know that it is unlikely for a few hundred years to be enough time for them to really become a myth, particularly in an era of relatively low tech. But yeah, it does make you wonder, like, do they not have stories about the face wearing things, or is that new? I feel like it probably isn't, but I don't know. Yeah, you make great, posed interesting questions there, Varsha. I don't know.
Yeah, I was curious about that. But yeah, and I did wonder about 300 years. It feels like the exact right amount of time to forget about something. But the skepticism doesn't seem necessarily new. And it also wasn't clear to me whether only even at that point, if only the mandate schoolmen were like fully aware of the consult and everybody else just knew of them as this figure from nightmares that maybe doesn't exist, because that tends to happen too, right? There's just like one faction fighting against someone and nobody else feels like they're affected. So I don't think that was explained either. So yeah.
There's a quote from early in the book, I think from like the first few pages. I can't find it in my notes exactly, but it is something like, "You can't raise walls against what's been forgotten." So,
Yeah,
that is a great quote.
I like that.
I do wonder then if any of that is. Oh my god, I'm about to sneeze. I jinxed it. Okay. That if that any of that is like was intentionally done, that in the same way the mandate intentionally remembered via Seswatha's like memories about the consult, if by chance the consult have been acting to destroy knowledge of their existence, just random theory, idea, proposal, because it could just be the passage of time. Certainly that's a big part of it, but I wonder if they've been actively like, I think of, oh my God, I don't want to go and spoil for, in King Killer Chronicles, there is a group of beings who actively hunt down lore related to them. So they remain shrouded in mystery. And I wonder if the consult has done something similar. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, the other thing is, maybe it's just that the mandate knew of them and they snuffed them out, or they didn't, or wasn't they didn't have a big impact, or we really don't know much about what happened the 300 years ago. But yeah.
I'm very curious about all that history because I mean, a part of me also wonders like, why hasn't there been a big, or why wasn't there, if not now, a big concerted effort to kill the Sronk? Are the Sronk that numerous? Like, are they just like, there's just like so untold millions, if not billions of them, or that they're just at this like perfect stalemate seemingly, or this slowly, I guess, encroaching upon the North. Just mankind failed to ever sort of form an army large enough to actually go and like, try to significantly, if not entirely, wipe them out, but yeah, there's a lot of the history we just don't know. We don't know what's been done and what's been tried and what failed. And oh God, I'm so curious about the Dunyan. Going back to them, I'm like, what is their deal? Like, I mean, we know what their deal is, but like, what is their history? Where did they come from? They're refugees. What are they refugees from? Again, did mankind hurt them, or was it the console?
But I think it's the first apocalypse, isn't it? Didn't we learn that at the beginning or in the prologue, or it wasn't clear? Yeah.
I thought it was coincidental that they ended up in the same place as Anasurimbor descendant. There was just that boy left, right? And these guys showed up. Were they also running from the same apocalypse, or did they come up out of nowhere and this felt like a good place to hide?
Yeah. I just want to make a general comment, just discussing with you. There's so much going on in this book. I think you'd mentioned that, Steve. Yeah. Anyway, it's just really appreciate that, and that's why I think why I like to read fantasy is just this. It's so much depth. Very impressed.
Absolutely. They are, in fact, called the Dunyan refugees of the apocalypse. That is explicitly said in the prologue. I'm looking at it right now.
That was what I thought.
They call themselves Dunyan.
And the first couple lines from the prologue, which other than the first line was, "One cannot raise walls against what has been forgotten, and the citadel of Ishwal succumbed during the height of the apocalypse."
There you go. Yeah.
So that's the first. Yeah. So
it is interesting that when they see the young Anasurimbor prince, they say, "We are Dunyan, child. What reason could you have to fear us?" So it almost makes them seem, I mean, that like they're pacifist or something, but it's weird because we know they're like warrior monks, or at least Kellis is. So I don't know. Oh, but they could be pulling their. Can never trust the Dunyan. I hate to judge an entire ethnic group, but man, by their way of life.
I also think that they probably prefer the Srunk to be have taken over the North, possibly. It's just a theory, because that kind of keeps the men from coming in and learning about them. But I just came up with that random theory that may be to their advantage.
Oh, yeah. I don't even mean the Dunyan. Like I totally get they're few enough that they would hide away. The Southerners, like I don't know why they haven't. And again, maybe they have. Who knows? We don't know enough about the history, but just made a concerted effort as like particularly during or immediately after the apocalypse to like try to actively genocide the Sronk effectively, because by our understanding, the Sronk are just like monsters. Like they're irredeemable. They're not, there isn't the gray that you see in humans. It seems like they just consume. And
we know that,
rape,
though?
apparently.
Well, that's what people say about them.
No, that's fair.
This
that's
is
a good
going to
point.
be one of
that's
those where we get, there's books now that explore orcs and their lives and their culture, and I find that to be really interesting. But I wonder if
Same.
we really don't know much about them.
You're right. I judged too quickly there. They could be even. I mean, the Skilvindi suck, but they could just be like the Skilvindi, where like, you know, they have some horrible values, but they're like, you know, they're still people. Just yeah, I guess I fell into the fantasy trap of being like, orcs can't redeem them, they're screwed, which is a debatably a problem in Lord of the Rings. You know.
I'm really tempted to start writing down theories because I want to. There's so many good theories that I should start writing them down.
Even though you've read
that
theories
cool.
that we have, or theories that you're coming up with.
Just so we can discuss.
Oh, okay.
Theories that you have that all of you have it's so interesting to hear the different theories and different thoughts, and I kind of want, once we finish, it'd be fun to go back and to see which ones you guys got right and what got wrong.
Yeah.
I'd
like that. I can.
I'll start that right now.
Yeah.
We had a theory about this Maithanet, though, and we don't
So the first
really
one
know what his deal is, right?
Yes.
He didn't show up.
Yes. He's still a mystery.
Can I harp on my Moingus's Maithanet theory one more time?
Please.
So we find out that what did we find out? Oh man, yes, that Dunyan can tell sorcery because it looks different. It looks more twisted, and so Maithanet could be Moingus because he's
one of the few.
But also he could be one of the few because Kellis thinks that he trained with the Sisorim. Did he? Yeah, because he's in Shimei now. So, but that would mean that it's
we don't
not
know
him.
that.
Yeah.
He didn't. Yeah, he doesn't say he's in Shimei. I'm at this point right now. He just says,
"Come to Shimei."
Shimei, and then send to me my son. Which I guess implies, right? I mean, certainly that's how you're supposed to read it, but that doesn't necessarily mean he is in Shimei or that he's there right at that moment and isn't gonna be there. You know, who knows? I mean, the Dunyain lie about shit all the time, or at least the Kellis. I'm not going to judge all the Dunyain. I'll judge Kellis. Kellis lies about shit all the time. Presumably, his father would do the same thing. I mean, he's from the same people, knows the Logos. You know, I'm 100%. You point out a great point, Varsha, which is that Kellis can see magic users, even though he cannot yet himself do magic, which lines up with Maithanet. So I fully am on board with Maithanet being Moingus, and I think again the strongest point is they both start with M. I drop my mic. Game over.
I'll just offer an alternative. I think he could be one of the. He's either one of the Kianin. I think the Kisharam now is too obvious that maybe we don't believe it. But he could also be he could be Scorus or one of those people, possibly as well.
It would be, I would be very, I don't know if it's getting our hopes up to want him to be someone we've met. I hope he is, but I don't know if then we're setting ourselves up for disappointment because I do feel like he's got to be in some sort of significant role. I mean, look at how fast Kellis has ascended, and Moingus is a decades. So he's got to be something significant, whether we've met him or not. I still like the idea that he's Maithanet. I think he definitely could be in the Sisharim though, or I mean, he could be the frickin' what's the head of the Kayanin called?
Raja or something like that. It's like a
the Padiraja. That's just how I don't know how you say it, but yes, maybe he's that guy. I mean, we don't know anything about him, so we have no idea. My guess would be probably not. It seems like, Mathanet just seems so obvious because we don't know anything about his past. Most people don't know anything about his past. He seemingly came out of nowhere. Like they say that. And, he rose up and is extremely compelling, is really good at manipulating people. The only person who would recognize him or the only two people who would recognize him have not met Mathanet. So it seems like that is the low-hanging fruit answer. But in some ways, I also wonder, is that too obvious then?
Yeah.
Or is that just the right amount of, like, if it turns out, we find out that even if it's late in, book 3 or whatever, that is him, I wouldn't be disappointed because it seems like that is properly seated.
Yeah.
I'm feeling more convinced because gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But this is anyway. Mathanet is the one. Okay, Mathanet is the one who kind of gets the whole holy war going, and the arrival of the Anasarimbor is what's bringing the second apocalypse. So there's the link there. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's clear. So that to me would strengthen that even more. Yeah. So that because his motivation to do this holy war is to get the, if you will, kind of get everything in motion for this apocalypse, which would bring his son, or anyway, there's something there.
That is a really interesting idea. The only thing I'd wonder is, how would he even know about the apocalypse? Because Kellis did not. Kellis had to find out about, the consult and everything. It's the mandate who have been actively watching, which I guess that could be the answer, right? Is he spent time among the mandate and found out that a second apocalypse is coming and the consult are still around. There is room there, certainly. Anything could have happened. There is also a delicious irony, I think, in the idea that this ultra zealot actually doesn't believe in their faith at all, and the leader of their faith doesn't believe in it at all. I do think that feels very appropriate for this story. But that would be great dramatic irony. But I don't know. We'll see. It would also be actually very interesting if Aduniane ended up converting, and finding faith somewhere else. That would be, I don't know if that's even possible given their worldview and things, but it would be particularly interesting for Kellis to have to confront that if his dad was actually a zealot.
How do I say this without sounding horrible? I feel like, yeah, okay. The religion or faith has, I think it comes from a place of so much passion, emotion, belief, whatever, that I'm going to say this in a way that's going to sound horrible, but I don't mean anything bad by it. But that is sort of like the definition of the darkness that comes before, right? Like it is it is like unexplained.
It's antithetical to the logos.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Which is why I think it's interesting, would be the idea of if he ended up succumbing to the things his people tell them not to, but at the same time, if I had to put money on it, I would bet he did not. And if he has made the net, he fully does not believe and is using the holy war to his own ends.
Yeah.
Mike, I like your theory of, that he's doing it to prepare for the apocalypse somehow. That definitely seems like it would be something that feels like it, that feels right.
Yeah. So I guess in a way you're implying that the Dunian could be less skilled, or there's a spectrum of skill among the Dunian for whatever it is that they're trying to achieve with the logos, which makes sense. That's how it should be, right? It's not like everybody is perfect. but maybe they don't get to call themselves Dunyin unless they
They
get
need.
there. I don't know.
Well, I guess.
No. I think they need.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Kellis is what, 30-something years old. I think they need to reach that, whatever, enlightenment legion, and then they are graduated or what have you. There's a lot we don't know.
I definitely think that, yeah, he could have been, fully logos sized, cut off from the darkness that comes before, but found, I don't know, had some sort of experience. I mean, we still don't even know if there are theoretically higher powers in this universe, right? I mean, my instinct is that there are not, particularly with some of the conversations we have, at least not the gods that are actively worshipped. But I mean, who knows, if, do you count the no god, right? Like, are these higher level beings divinities, I guess it depends how you define it. And again, if I had to bet, I would bet he is not in fact down with the Thousand Temples beliefs, but it would be interesting.
I'm going to guess / theorize that I don't think we'll see any real gods. Like, we'll either not have that question answered, or it'll turn out that none of these gods and no gods exist. That's a guess. Like, based on everything that's happened so far with the crusade and everything, like, I feel like to really say that it's a pointless holy war, which I don't know if that's what he's trying to say. You've also got to say that the cause is not as significant as everyone thought. Maybe. That would be one way of making the point, I guess. It's not the only way, but
I
agree. I mean, I think it would stay mysterious. My guess was just that's something that's never answered.
So the one thing that I'm sensing, but we won't know until later, until we've read more, probably, is there's kind of a negative connotation about religion or faith, as maybe not, but there's a dichotomy. It comes up. I mentioned it earlier. I'll just mention it again. Not the knowledge versus faith, and it's like so when you look at that kind of dichotomy, maybe they're overlapping. If they're probably overlapping, but there's some assumption being made that the Dunyin are these like evolved people or enlightened people, but they don't seem to have faith, or they don't have religion. You know what I mean? Which I don't quite understand yet, or it's not fully. I haven't wrapped my brain around it, at least. But I feel like that's really important in this book. There was one passage where they read like the high Lord's Prayer, but it's like a version of the Christian, or it's very obviously very similar. I think that was on purpose, right? But I was well, is he? I don't want to say he's making fun of religion or whatever, but I just don't like. There's something about. There's just something going on here that I haven't fully unpacked. But when you think about cultures that are not developed, or countries or societies, or communities even that are not as well developed, and then you're kind of imposing your beliefs from that, from your cultural perspective. I don't know if it's the word is relativism or whatever, but I keep getting caught up in that. I just keep thinking about that. I don't have much else to say. It's not a deep thought or whatever.
No, I think it is insightful, though. I mean, I definitely think this is very critical of blind faith, particularly. Sure. I think even as Acamian sort of defines it, as like skepticism is a at least as Acamian views it, is like a virtue. he says something to that effect to Proyas, that like there's a difference between those who like believe blindly and those who like keep a level of skepticism, that ask questions.
Mhm.
At the same time, I'm curious if the books confront this, but the Dunyain, they're certainly above, like they do not believe in divinities. Like we know that explicitly, but what they have is a religion. Like the Logos is a religion, but it is almost presented as if it's not, or somehow different, even though, I mean, you could argue that their whole idea of the darkness that comes before, that's a faith idea that exists, right? Like that isn't a truth, unless we find out it is. I mean, certainly the book seems to present it like it is, but that's an idea. That's not something that is scientifically proven, and even science is constantly evolving, right? The previous theories are proven wrong. We continue to understand the world better and better. In some ways, understand how little we understand. While to me, I associate the Dunyain with certainty, which is also, I think, something that they criticize about a lot of these faiths. Like this book really criticizes about these faiths, is that zealous level of certainty. That said, I think it's intentional. Like, I mean, Kellis is not like a paragon Superman character, where you're supposed to look up and be, I think, overly inspired by him. Like, I think that dichotomy you're talking about of like rationality versus like faith. One, I don't know that it's saying, that the far like cold logic is the solution either, because I just don't see this book as trying to present Kellis as this moral paragon. I think it is critical,
Sure.
too, of the idea of disconnecting yourself from yourself, from your soul. I think, again, in some ways, maybe the idea of skepticism is a potent thematic point. And again, I'm very curious to see if Bakker is aware, and if he actively challenges the Dunyain in their perspective, because certainly so far the point of view of the story seems to, if not align with them as like a moral good, align with them as like a factual correctness, right? As opposed to they have one view of the world that is or is not reflective of reality. Because again, the darkness that comes before, that's an idea. That's not, unless again we literally see it, and then like somehow it's embodied, and we're like, oh, there's the darkness that comes before.
Yeah,
it's real.
I think they're convinced that it's like it's something they practice and they can achieve. So I don't know if they see it as a religion, but yeah.
Exactly. It doesn't seem like they view it the same way, even though it literally is. They have the same blind faith, just in their particular beliefs. Like Kellis doesn't seem skeptical at all of the Logos as a concept. Like, for all his talk of rationality, he doesn't question the idea of the darkness that comes before, or that anything else could be impacting. The idea of the self as being this like self-driving, like capable of independent thought. Like, he doesn't question that. That's a religion. It's even organized. They have their organized set of beliefs. It's the same type of zealotry, just from a different perspective, a different philosophical worldview. And I say this, by the way, as I am an atheist. Like, I do not believe in God. I retain a level of, I guess you could say, skepticism, because I'm not going to pretend like I understand how the universe works. But I also find, even though that there are things that ring true to me in the Dunyain's philosophy of Logos, it's still like a belief. I mean, in the same way that like justice is a belief. Like, justice isn't real. You believe in justice. It's not an atomized concept, you know, or you believe in equality, you believe in democracy, you believe in whatever. And yeah, I'm very curious to see if Baker actively confronts
should
that.
we have talked about this when we talk about the
It-
whole book? That's a good.
we still have to decide whether we do that, but yeah, we can talk about it more if we do end up doing one of those. But yeah, I love that. Like, I didn't think of it, but now that you both brought it up, it does feel like two extreme versions of two worldviews, right? That of religion and that of logic / knowledge. And yeah, I think that even with the scientific and knowledge aspect of the world, people who think themselves scientific, it is possible to get so deeply attached to a concept that you refuse to see reason against it, or you like it becomes a religion. So yeah, I like how you both put it. It's two it's extreme representations of two schools of thought, sort of, it seems to me like. So I do agree with you, Carl. I think we probably see more exploration. Not that in fact, I think Callus might be our counterpoint. Like the crusade is the is the negative representation of religion. Like, oh, here's everything that can go bad if you get too extreme with your religious views. And maybe Callus or like the Dunian, like lack of empathy and emotion, or like what can happen potentially. Maybe that's the claim he's making. I don't know that I'll have to think about whether I agree with that claim, if that's what he is saying, but it does seem like it might be, with Kellis as the representative character of that school of thought.
Yeah, it definitely, to me, I read him as representing cold logic, like, you know, the willingness to. I mean, he's more complex than that, and their philosophy is more complex than that, right? Because it goes beyond, like, what is even, you know, the logic. I mean, logos and logic, right? The etymology there is clear, but you know, the fact that he disconnects from himself and then acts in a certain way. And that's the weird thing, is like, what motivates him, right? Like, theoretically, a purely logical being would not feel driven to act at all. You know, yeah, like, it's emotion that motivates things.
Right. Yeah.
So, what the fuck is up with Kellis? I
And the
don't know.
Dunian as a whole, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Just in general, it seems I can't put my finger on it, but there is a paradox in their way of being, because some of it has to stem from emotion. Like I think that's essentially what they're calling darkness that comes before, like the emotion, like human, what is it? Inclination? That's not the right word, but the fact that humans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instincts, maybe.
Instinct,
I don't know.
For emotion, yeah.
Oh, no.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Mike.
no, I think that for them, emotion is showing that you are too attached to something, or you're not in control of your whatever the logos practice is, and that whenever they get emotional, they get distracted from all of their skills. So I think, like, that's, to me, that's part of the reason why they're kind of like robots, or
attachments. It just feels like, again, there's a paradox there, because they're attached to their philosophy. Like, they still have I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, it's a really interesting concept to see play out. And Kellis is a fascinating character, and I'm excited to see where he goes and how many lives he ruins along the way. I've elected myself Kellis hater, because someone has to be. I don't actually hate him, but I am gonna be this group's Kellis hater.
I have elected myself cautiously neutral on the Kellis front.
Cautiously
Mike, you a hater, or you cautious?
Maybe, but I think this book is not an optimistic book. Or the series.
Mm.
So I just didn't want to say what Varsha said, but I'm more neutral about it. I think he's the driving force of this whole story. So, yeah.
Definitely. The epigraph, the one that I forget which of you quoted. I think it was you, Mike,
Varsha.
about, or was it you? I don't know. Someone quoted it. Yeah, about how like we didn't realize we all changed. He didn't. You know, I mean that to me is like it was such a like signpost that he's the main character and he's going to drive the story.
Yeah.
Uh, I am, which I wasn't surprising. I mean, again, the fact that we opened with him in the prologue, like that, pretty clearly indicated to me. And he already, I mean, he makes stuff happen everywhere he goes. He's a force of nature, really.
But and then I was also, when I was reading that, I was thinking, oh, is this like one of those kind of chosen one trope things? But I feel like he's twisting it quite a bit. I think he's turning that on its head here. We don't necessarily think he's going to save everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree, and I certainly don't think there's some sort of spiritual choice. Like with chosen ones, there's almost always like that element of like divine, like right, you could say. You know, like if you think of the dragon reborn in the Wheel of Time or something, right, where like they're like almost cyclically like spiritually superior. They're like spiritually the main character, while Kellis imposes himself on the story. I mean, as a function of the story, it works the same way, I guess. But in terms of like exactly what it's saying, he certainly, I don't think some higher power elected him as a chosen one. I think he is just going to make himself a, like you said, like a dark, subverted chosen one. Very much a
I was going to say Paul Atreides.
I think.
Is this? Oh god, I'm trying to find the section where Akamian has his dream again. So I was trying to see. It's just that one of his seed will return at the second apocalypse. Doesn't say anything about him saving the world from it. So I think the mistake I made when when Akamian sees Kellis, he has this thought to himself that this is the man that everything is going to be centered around, something to that effect. And I was like, oh, cool. I've been thinking all along that Kellis and maybe Moingus, they're going to stop the apocalypse, but it could just be that they cause it, you know?
I think you're right.
Although
yeah.
Interesting idea. It's a very interesting idea. I think it would be how are they defining the apocalypse, right? Like, what is the apocalypse? Because if we're talking about like the consult and like, I mean, does it just mean taking over the world? Like when I think of apocalypse, I think of destruction. And Kellis to me doesn't seem like he doesn't take pleasure in cruelty. He doesn't take pleasure in destruction. He just does things.
Right.
We don't know why.
Oh, I don't mean that he'll actively destroy the world, just like their actions might bring about the end of the world.
Yeah, that's fair. That's right. Yeah. He could inadvertently.
That's a paradox too.
That's an interesting idea.
But I just found this. It says an Anasurimbor will return at the end of the world. So I guess the end of the world is already in progress by the time they're supposed to return. And it's also the ravings of a dying king. So who knows?
Yeah, right. I mean, because he also like, we don't have any reason to believe yet that prophecy actually like exists in this world, do we? Like it's a prophecy, but have we seen seers? Like have there been people who've seen the future? Like I feel like people don't talk about it like there is, you know? So I would expect skepticism even if there was, but this is like the one prophecy we know of, and it seems so antithetical unless there are like time travel powers where like people can literally like plant their brain in the future and then come back or something, you know? Like I don't know how they would be able to predict that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot we don't know. I mean, who knows how the magic works, really?
I'm about to change the subject really drastically. So, does anyone have anything else to add to that?
No.
Oh, we saw a dragon,
When
didn't
did we
we?
see a dragon?
Didn't
In
we?
the dream?
Yeah, a fake dragon or a phantom of a dragon that uh blew fire. And anyway, a dragon was mentioned. I don't know if it was an actual dragon, but it seemed to be a phantom of a dragon. I forget when it came up. But also there was a conversation between Proyas and Akamian, in which Proyas asks him, do dragons really exist? And Akamian does not answer. So that made me wonder, and I forgot to bring it up during that conversation, whether dragons are a thing in this world. But there is something that they refer to. So dragon as a concept exists. I don't know if they are real or if there's myths that the people believe in. And I wish I could remember where the fire happened that the dragon.
Well, definitely in the memories, he dreams of dragons. Akamian, like that definitely happens, because that was something I asked early on, as I didn't remember, and you guys pointed out that there was a mention of dragons. So dragons definitely exist.
There was a phantom dragon in this section, not from
Okay.
the dreams.
I remember too, but I don't know where it came up. But it wasn't like a long passage there.
I will say, while Steve, if you're writing down theories, I don't know if you have this one yet. I am sticking by my theory with very little evidence other than the size of it, that the tusk is a dragon tusk.
Ooh.
And that someone rode on a dragon tusk. I don't know who, I don't know what happened there, but I think the tusk is a dragon tusk.
Could be.
Okay.
Totally.
I'm sticking with narwhal.
Okay.
3 C's.
Oh, I hope so. That would be even better.
Oh, in the flashback when how do you say his name? Eleazarus thinks back to when the head of the Scarlet Spires was killed 10 years ago. It was with a phantom dragon. A golden phantom reared from Eleazarus' outstretched hands, a scaled neck, a mighty crest, jaws scissoring open. With a queen's deliberate grace, the dragon's head dipped and scourged the scissorum with fire. Oh, I think he conjured a dragon, so it wasn't a real dragon.
Oh yeah, it's magic.
I misread that. I thought the scissorum used a dragon thing against them. But anyway, dragons are a myth in this world. So I guess the question is whether they really exist or if they're just a myth. Probably not just a myth.
Unless they were summoned. Again, I distinctly remember in one of the dreams there is mention of dragons. And I'm pretty sure Steve nodded. Yeah. So Steve is nodding for listeners. So there are dragons confirmed.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there is a mention of dragons in this book from the dreams. I forget exactly where, but there is a mention of them.
I thought it was in one of the epilogues.
So we'll see them.
Epigraph. I was looking for it.
It may, yeah. Anywhere and wherever dragons are mentioned, I'm glad for it.
Yep.
That's my opinion of the matter.
I agree. I haven't met dragons yet in Truth of Crowns. I'm hoping you have some. But if there aren't, that's fine.
Listen, all I'll say is there's a lot of serpent imagery, isn't there?
Okay. Oh, yeah. No, I did meet a serpent thing with... Okay, never mind. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think there... Oh, last point that maybe not. I keep lying about this all the time, but there was... just quickly wanted to say the logos has no beginning or no end. That whole that section, that Kellis's flashback, it started with someone telling him that the game has no beginning or no end. I thought that was a very interesting contrast to like a game of manipulation, which kind of is what Callis does with the logos. Has no beginning and no end, and same with the game. But that was a really cool transition. I thought that was wonderfully done.
I wonder if they're connected.
Mm.
You know, now that you mentioned that, Janan and Logos, like, do they have? Obviously, they're different now, although they have similar sort of tenets in some ways. But I wonder if there is like an origin point that they share.
That's really cool because Jnan, which I've been pronouncing Jnan, because it looks and sounds a lot like the Sanskrit word for knowledge.
Oh, there you go. This is why we keep you around, Varsha.
So I think that makes a lot of sense now because it's not, the word Jnan has nothing to do with social niceties. It's literally knowledge. But if it's the same thing as logos, except
I think there's more to it than that. I think it's about caste as well, and your place in the. Somebody says, "Oh, I forget who was asked this, but in the book, but somebody says, "Well, what is this exactly?" And he says, "Well, it's what we do." But I think there is mention to the caste comes up quite a bit too in this part. So I thought that there was an element of that as well.
I read it as like the political maneuvering, like how they function politically, the games they play. Like in the Wheel of Time, the equivalent is like the Game of Houses. You call it the Game of Thrones and the Game of Thrones. But certainly caste is a part of that.
Caste and cultivation.
Social
and certainly plays a big role. Yeah.
And like the Ainoni, they have such an extreme version of it that they don't even show their faces. I feel like I've seen that somewhere, but I can't remember where. Like that, there's some other book that had. Like, I don't want to reveal my expressions. I'm going to hide behind a mask. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting.
Kellis still reads through him, doesn't he? He just through his body language alone.
Oh, really? I didn't get to that part, but that's really cool if he did. Yeah.
When he's like going through everyone, I think, right? I feel like Kellis is one of the High Ainon King is one of the people who Kellis looks at and Proyas names, I want to say, and that's when they're talking about Yunan, I think, actually. Are there any other Sanskrit words that you recognize? Because these have been important relatively when you brought it up before.
I think Sepharamuni. Who did we see wearing saffron? Because like Indian sages do wear saffron. I think it was the Fanim, the Sisorim, right? Wearing saffron robes. But yeah, that was interesting because I felt like a mix of a whole lot of things. Not necessarily all Hindu or Indian. But yeah.
Definitely. No, I definitely get the feeling that he mixed a lot of cultures. Like, I went in looking for direct parallels to like the cultures that took part in the First Crusade, particularly just all around. And I think there has been someone mentioned that there's definitely been a lot of Mediterranean influence. And like Hellenic influence, so I definitely think there's a mix going on.
Yeah,
seems weird.
I just wanted to say I unfortunately I have to drop off, but I think we talked about a lot of important stuff today, and was just really enjoying the series so far, and look forward to the next discussion. So I have to say goodbye and talk to you, I guess, in a week or two. Good night.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Mike.
Talk to you more, Mike.
Good night.
All right. Good night.
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, I was talking about, let me change that. It looks weird. Sefara Muni. Muni means sage. I don't know if that is the root he used it from, I don't know what the first part of the word is. If it's an Indian word, I don't know it. Yeah, I didn't catch any others though.
I would bet it's all intentional. Not to say that, any one author is like all knowing, but certainly stuff around language. Bakker, he studied philology, so I definitely think anything you notice, I suspect is intentional. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, that should be fun.
Have you? I forget, Steve. Did you? I assume you reached out to him, right?
Baker?
Yeah.
I reached out to his agent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Be so cool to talk to him. Definitely.
Yeah.
I'd love to pick his brain. Even though we're only one book in, Steve, you could ask him all the interesting questions. We would be throwing all our crazy theories at him. I would just be like, dragons!
Yeah. Yeah, no word back. I think he's been kind of on a hiatus, but I figured why not. But nothing yet. You never know.
Never know. There was... Oh man, I forgot. Oh yeah, I realized during my reading of this part that I love this notion of this dream that gets passed on. It is just such a great idea, and I love what he did with it. It's exactly the same dream the second time around, but I'm almost certain it's slightly different. I just haven't gone back and looked, but it's got to be slightly different this time around. I want to go catch the differences, but yeah. Anyway,
That's what I wondered. I remember in one of our early chats, like, memory is not perfect, and let alone a magical memory passed along people through generations, right? Like, has it been tampered with? Does it change at all in any way? When one individual experiences it, does it change over their experience? Like, there's a lot of unanswered questions. And yeah, you make a good point, Varsha, to check to see what the differences are beyond just the prose, which I imagine is just fundamentally different. He wrote two different scenes. Although who knows, maybe he copied and pasted.
Yeah.
Got to inflate that word count. Get the big chunky book, just enough copying and pasting.
Yeah.
You're like, it's just dreams. He just keeps having dreams.
Not writing a research paper can't say one and then refer to. Cool. Anything else that we should talk about before we close this out?
Just want to mention one of my favorite quotes from maybe ever is on page 495. It was uncanny the way certain days defied the passage of years, became virulent, and plagued the present as an undying yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just so good.
Yes, I have that highlighted. I love that.
Yeah, but just wanted to mention that before we go.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I did love that one. There were a lot of good quotes from this part.
So we've been we're definitely running pretty late, but I do want to talk about the Scarlet Spires guy. We get his POV in this part, right? That's this part. Yeah, that was interesting to get a better view inside them, and how much it honestly reminded me of like Xerius and a lot of the other political players, where they're like just so full of themselves and like clearly kind of intelligent, but also really stupid too. And like it's interesting. Like he's like playing this really complex game and making really complex maneuvers, and also is like just so clearly falling, I guess you could say, into the darkness that comes before. Just like totally missing obvious things because of his emotional reading and his sort of very specific worldview. It was very cool to get one of their perspectives, because they've been so mysterious, I'm very continuously intrigued by all the different schools and seeing all of their different worldviews and philosophies. That's something I'm very curious about, what differentiates the Scarlet Spires in terms of how they view the world. And I hope we get a better understanding about like what drives them. Like we kind of understand the mandate, we get their deal. and I'm curious to see Sharam developed more and the Scarlet Spires and what's the Nansuri?
Isn't
There are a whole bunch of schools. There were also mentions of other schools that I swear hadn't been mentioned
oh yeah,
before.
A lot.
that's called the 3C school or something.
Yeah, there's like a number of different schools that I didn't even realize existed. So it's definitely, there's a lot of room. Big world, as you've mentioned many a time, Steve. It's a big, complex world. Fun to unpack it.
The Scarlet Spires lost all their spice too. Do you think it's the work of the consult? We did see with Indra it was the consult, but then they were also interested in the Mandate schoolman that he was helping. Um, do you think it's the consult or just Maithanet doesn't like spice?
Both, I think.
Between
I mean, I think not that I don't think Maithanet is a member of the consult. Like, I feel pretty strongly that is not the case, just because of the spies we know that are in the Thousand Temples. But given that, the Sarcellus and all of his other people in quotes, that I'm sure they played a role. The consult played a role in getting rid of the spies, and I'm sure that was to their advantage. So in that instance, it may be a case of interests overlapping between Maithanet, whoever he is, whatever he wants, and the consult members who are working underneath him.
Yeah, makes sense.
So much fun.
Are you still busy typing out the theories?
Yeah, I was trying to keep track of. I started a thread on the forum about predictions. So
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go read that too.
Any last quotes or anything you want to say, Steve? I'm always interested to hear what stands out to you.
there's so many. There's so many of them. But I think what stood out to me in this one was just I think the pacing, like we mentioned at the end of the book, and just it doesn't end the way you would expect it to, but I think it does end on a kind of fade to black, roll credits kind of way, like this foreboding feeling of, like, it's almost like the Holy War has become a force in itself, and it's come almost like you can feel it, like almost like getting out of control, like it's taking a life of its own, and it's become a force that's, you start to wonder who can contain it.
Yeah. It definitely is a very clear turn in the story, right? Like in that way, it was very climactic, that you can see things have shifted. I mean, Akamian knows the consult is there now. Like he'd only ever suspected. He strongly suspected after Enrao died, but now he knows, and that's definitely a big, sort of full circle thing, I guess you could say. And God, what is Kellis going to do? Now he's homies with Akamian. I don't even know. Can't wait for him to meet Esmenet. I know that's going to happen. He's going to meet everyone and woo them all.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. I was griping about this last week, but since we finished the book, the back, the blurb, why does it say that Kellis meets these people when it happens 3/4 of the way? So I had, the theories I had that Kellis is Maithanet. I happened to read the blurb after our discussion. I was like, yeah, that theory got slashed, but also Kellis didn't show up again until, I don't know, the 3/4 in. So.
Oh, I will say, on that note, for anyone listening or to both of you, do not read the synopsis for the rest of the books.
Okay, thanks. I didn't, but that's a good.
Stay away from the synopsis.
Accidentally, so I've got to not look at it.
The synopsis is straight up wrong in this one, or it's a spoiler of a later book. Because you're right, it says he meets them. It says 2 men and 2 women. He's only met one woman of import. So Um, he doesn't. You haven't read that scene yet. I don't think he met Esmenet then. In her last scene. So, am I forgetting that? They never met, did they? No, they haven't met yet.
No, not yet.
But we forgot to talk about Esmenet and the dude with the blonde hair in the market.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it revealed who he is towards the end of the book?
I don't think so. He's just like a knight. He's just like a
Okay.
dude. I assumed he was going to be a consult and was like part of their plan, but it didn't seem like that. It seemed like he was just like a horny dude. And
But he has a moment of regret at the end, which
yeah,
added a layer of mystery to him. And I don't think it was just, oh no, I slept with a prostitute. I think it was something else, that he shouldn't have slept with her in particular.
interesting. I just read that as post-nut clarity.
Okay.
He was like, "Oh man, oh no, couldn't have let my sword lead me around." But he certainly had a very strong response. That is stronger than you would probably expect.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't seem to have any doubt when he paid her. So
right.
I didn't read it as it was because of that. And also, I don't know. I don't think we have reason to believe that, well, whores are branded and, like all that stuff. So it is bad, but is that something that they feel morally wrong about? Like, is it feeling guilty about having committed a sin? Is that what we think I didn't read that into
That's
it.
how
It
I
didn't
read
seem
it.
like it.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe
I don't know. It's an interesting point. I certainly, while I was reading it, I got bad vibes from him. Like I was convinced he was like consult or something, and I was actually surprised with the way it played out. But no, you make a good point. He certainly had a stronger reaction than I would probably expect if it was just like, oh, I shouldn't have slept with a prostitute,
Yeah. Like maybe he's tied to Sarsilis and he's expecting Sarsilis will be mad at him for that, or I don't know, something. But that was a very interesting scene. That I think if guilt over sleeping with a prostitute was all he felt, it probably didn't need to be there. Maybe, except maybe it means something to Esmenet, perhaps.
I was going to say, I
Yeah.
think it's very telling for her. If
Yeah.
anything, she's the focus of that scene, because it means that she is. I don't know. She prostituted herself out even though she didn't need to. Like she previously, that was her excuse, was that it was a need, and it was. I mean, it clearly has been. Like she starved, she struggled for food, but that it has become so ingrained into who she is that she does it even when she doesn't need to, which was very sad to see because it didn't seem like she particularly enjoyed it. Other than the strict bodily pleasure. And then it's so creepy afterwards, Sarcellus's reaction.
Oh, yeah.
He's so weird. Oh, God, everything. I don't even want to get into that. That was so weird.
It was a very disturbing scene.
Knowing what it is, it's just like, ugh.
And she forgave him for his abuse pretty much immediately. That was uncomfortable to read. Yeah.
Poor Esme is so broken. She is so broken. Ugh, I feel so bad for her.
Yeah. I'm laughing because Steve's nodding sadly.
It's gonna be a lot of fun. Yes. Well, not fun, but I will say that a lot of these things will. I think when I was reading the first time, there's a little bit of a concern that there won't be a payoff for all these things, but a lot of these major events there is a payoff.
Okay.
So
Okay.
That's good.
yeah.
I choose to have faith. I trust it will come together. The one thing I'm actually nervous about is that knowing that there is a whole 4-book thing. I mean, we've been told apparently this trilogy works well on its own, even if you don't get all the answers. But I'm just like, I'm so curious, just structurally, what it seems like, and do we get what the payoffs are like, I guess. But again, I choose to have faith that the 3 books will be cool and work, and then the 4 books will be even cooler, knowing the whole picture. And that is Steve nodding because that is how he feels. And so I trust I will feel similarly.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Cool. That was a good first book. I'm excited for the next one, which we are discussing 2 weeks from now, the first 4 chapters. Yeah, let's do outros unless anyone has anything more to bring up. Cool. Steve, would you like to go first?
Sure. You can find me on pagechewing.com, and I'm curious to see, because the second book is a lot of people's favorite book, and for me it's more down the bottom. So I'm curious to see what everyone here in our group thinks about it, because it's universally like the favorite book, but for me it's not. So it's going to be fun.
Where do you rank book 1?
Book 1 is probably 1 or 2.
Oh wow! Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And favorite in all 7 or in the trilogy?
All 7.
Okay, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably up there.
Oh.
Yeah, it's top 3 at least.
It's also interesting because like if the second book of 7 is the favorite, many people might tend to give up on the series later if other books they like less. But it's interesting that there are so many people who like the series, but the second book is their favorite. But I guess
right.
yeah. Carl.
Yes, you can find me throughout social media, a lot of social media at Carl D. Albert. Certainly, you can find me on the Page Chewing Forum. And you can find my book, Truth of Crowns, on Amazon. Currently, the ebook is on sale for the holidays for 99 cents. So if you want to check that out, it's shameless self-promotion there. And we're doing a little read. And yeah.
Cool. Yeah. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and the About page has other ways to reach me and links to my podcast. I also haunt the page chewing forum with everybody else here. So, yeah, we'll see everyone in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.